Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again. It's about 11 o'clock, or actually I should say 10:06 on a Saturday morning. Beautiful day here in Midcoast, Maine, 2023. So hope everyone's doing good. The Yeah, I always want to give a shout out to some of the new subscribers to the Film Fanatic page. And there's been a few new folks that have joined on, and they've been commenting a lot on the videos, and that's super awesome. So keep it coming. I love interacting. One of the coolest things too, every now and then when I get some folks commenting on some of these videos, we get into a thing of where we make a kind of a recommendation list, and I think that is super cool and super awesome. There's a new guy, this guy Ken, who just started to just had subscribed to the Film Fanatic page, and it was really funny because I did a review on a film the other day on this exploitation movie where the lead character, and it's such an odd thing. It was such a weird thing into itself, but then it was such an odd thing to see or to experience. It just totally like kind of blew me away. But the lead role in this movie, and it's a Jack Weiss movie. I can't remember the title of it right now. It's funny. But anyway, I did a show on this movie the other day, and the lead role, the lead actor, so reminds me. And this film had come out in 1976, so it's wicked old school, or 75 even. And the lead actor for me just seemed like Christian Bale, Christian Bale's doppelganger. It was so incredibly weird and strange. When I first saw the movie, I've seen it a few times, and I love it. It's an awesome movie, directed by Jack Weiss, who is this pretty crazy, wacky, like exploitation director. And when I watched it, the first time I watched it, I was just like, what is going on here? Because everything, I love Christian Bale. I mean, he's most well known for, I mean, he's been around for years and he's been in all kinds of movies, but he's probably most well known at this point for being Batman. And I followed his career for a long, long time, and he's always been one of my favorites. Really diverse track record as far as different kinds of films, but he has a certain style and the way he carries himself, and kind of a certain look all the time. But he's got such incredible ability. But when I watched this film, I was just like, what? Right away, I started thinking this lead actor reminds me of Christian Bale, and then it got more strange as it went on because it was like everything from top to bottom, what to me was resembling Christian Bale, from like his mannerisms to even how his voice sounded, the way he would carry himself on screen, the same kind of size. He looked like he's even the same weight, the same height. His hair, I mean, everything. And it was so bizarre. And I remember watching this movie with a friend, and I remember commenting about that weird doppelganger thing. And my friend who I was watching the movie with had no idea who Christian Bale was, and I was like, "What? You don't know who Christian Bale is?" And I was just like, "Wow, okay." And I was almost tempted after we got done watching that movie to throw in, as I have a lot of movies with Christian Bale in it in my collection, and I was tempted to throw in a Christian Bale movie and say and show her, like, see what I mean? Are you seeing what I'm seeing? But I didn't end up doing that, and we ended up watching a movie, and then we ended up I don't know, watch something else afterwards. But I had told her, if you get a chance, look up Christian Bale online or whatever, and check him out. And it's so strange. One of the strangest kinds of things watching a movie. It was almost to the point of, at least for me, almost kind of distracting, and it almost took me out of the movie because I was just like kind of enamored and kind of bewildered by how much he looked like Christian Bale and just everything. Like it was basically like his clone. And then also considering that this came out like, almost 50 years ago, this movie. So it was a trip. It was a total trip. But one of the new subscribers on this channel, Ken, had uh, saw the review for the film, and then I guess he watched it shortly after. And I had said in the review for the film about the whole Christian Bale thing, and he commented this morning where he was just like, "Holy crap! Like it's so bizarre." So it was really funny, and I love that, that kind of interaction with people who are, fellow film fanatics, because at the end of the day, it's about, you know maybe checking out some films you have never seen before. And a couple of weeks ago, there was a couple of other folks who had commented on the videos, on some various videos I was doing, and they had seen that movie, but then they were saying, well, if you like this style, have you heard of this particular director or these other films? And they like threw out a couple. They wrote, they typed out a couple of other names, and I hadn't heard of them. And I was like, wow, cool. So I like checked out some of that stuff, and so I love when there's a kind of a recommendation thing that goes on, and you can kind of share ideas, because that's like super fun. And that's the whole kind of main purpose behind this whole channel, is at the end of the day, it's really about the films. So very cool. And lately, it's been awesome. I've been going to the movies a lot. At least, I mean, back in the day, before things got really crazy in our world, I used to go to the movies all the time. I mean, almost at one point, almost every weekend. I had a little group of friends at the time, and this is going back quite a few years, but I had a little group of friends that I had, and a couple of those guys were really into movies too. And I remember it became almost like a weekly ritual where I would get the local paper, the Free Press, and they would show what movies were coming out in the theaters, the local theaters, and then there would also be like a little review of each movie. And at that time, it just seemed like there were so many movies coming out, like just all the time. I mean, this still is a thing, but very different. It felt like back then, and you know, there was always something that was coming out that piqued my interest. So we would make plans like that Friday or Saturday. Typically, we would go on like a Friday night and go to the movies. We would go to, a lot of the times we would go to the Colonial Theater. We would go to the Strand, and then Flagship, and it was like a regular ritual thing. And we started doing it almost every week, and it was great. And and then I changed jobs and kind of where I was working and my social circle. Some of those guys moved away and had kids and all these things, but I kind of kept up that thing for a while with a couple of other friends that I had, where it was a little less frequent, but we were going quite a bit, and we were mostly going. A couple of my friends lived in live in Belfast, so at that time we started going to the Colonial Theater in Belfast. We were going there. I used to go there anyway all the time, but m- most of the time we were, with this newer kind of thing, we were going to the Colonial all the time. So that became a regular thing to do. And and now it's like pretty sporadic, but I've seen quite a few movies, in the theater. But it's been really cool because lately I've been to the movies a bunch of times. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, I saw the new John Wick movie, which was just amazing. Then on Wednesday, I went to go see the new Nicolas Cage movie, Renfield, and I just put up a post, a video review for that film, and then when I saw John Wick, I did a post for that the day after, and just great, fantastic movie, super fun. And one thing I noticed too is that there's a lot more folks this time around. There has been more, a lot more folks coming out to the theater. So very, very cool. And now when I go to the theater, I go to Flagship Cinema because that's really the main place. And then also another place that is really awesome, which shows a lot of weird kind of exploitation movies, is the Waldo Theater in Waldoboro. There's an organization called Waldo After Dark, and they show all these interesting and kind of bizarro, low budget exploitation movies, and it's amazing. It's an amazing series. I might be going there tonight, so to see a couple of other movies. They're doing a double feature tonight of two anime movies, so I might go to that. There's this possibility that this gig came up for tonight, but I'm seeing what's going to happen with that. So it's been great. So it's been a blast to see movies again in the theater, and I've been really impressed with the last two movies. And today's show, especially, today's show is about the new Evil Dead movie entitled Evil Dead Rise. Huge fan of the Evil Dead franchise. You know, those were, movies that were part of my youth growing up, especially the second one, the first two movies especially, and Army of Darkness. I remember seeing Evil Dead 2 the first time, and it was funny. I remember watching that all the time as a kid, and it wasn't until quite a few years later that I kind of realized or understood that that was actually kind of a remake of the original that was also directed by Sam Raimi. Evil Dead 2 had a slightly higher budget, a bigger budget, and it was a little bit more funny and comical, kind of a slapstick. And then when I discovered Evil Dead, the original, I was like, wow, it was like kind of a revelation. It was probably about 3 or 4 years later. I was just blown away because that movie is just like, that movie to me is just one of the greatest, easily one of the greatest horror movies. And really exemplifies the power of independent cinema and how you can use so much imagination and bring that to the big screen, yet you have no real financial resources. And that it's like kind of the epitome of guerrilla style filmmaking. And that movie, even to this day, remains my favorite in the franchise. But I love all the films. Army of Darkness, that movie is so goofy and silly and just so over the top, but amazing. Amazing film. And also, the spin-off TV series is really great. Ash vs. the Evil Dead. That's a really great series. I haven't finished all of it, but I've seen, I think, like 2 or 3 of the seasons. I think there's a couple more to go. Eventually, I'll see them, but really great, really awesome. A really great kind of continuation of the story, more or less. Kind of a spin-off kind of thing. And then there was the Evil Dead remake that came out, I think in 2013 or 14, which is really awesome. I really love that movie. I think it's one of the best. It might even be my favorite along with the first one. I own all of the movies. The only one I don't own on Blu-ray is Army of Darkness, which I need to get. And eventually I'll probably buy the TV show if I see it, but but I have the first two on Blu-ray, and I have a bunch of editions of Evil Dead, the first one. And when I saw, like, I think it was probably 4 or 5 months ago, actually it was probably last year, maybe the beginning of this year, that I saw that there was news or talk of this new Evil Dead, and it was going to be called Evil Dead Rise. And then the first trailer came out, and I watched the trailer. I was, I thought it looked amazing. And then I heard that, well, Sam Raimi, the original director and creator of the series, and also Bruce Campbell were, actually really putting a lot of money into this movie. They were both producing it. I was super interested, but when I saw the trailer, I was just like, whoa, like it looked amazing. So it became one of my most anticipated movies to see. It's been the two biggest anticipated movies that I've been wanting to see was Evil Dead Rise, and then also the new film by Ari Aster, starring Joaquin Phoenix, whose name the title of it escapes me. I love Ari Aster too. He's one of my favorite directors. He is responsible for Hereditary, Midsummer, just modern day. I look at those two films as like modern day horror classics. Just awesome movies. So last night I went with a friend and we saw the new Evil Dead movie, Evil Dead Rise. And my first reaction to it was awesome. I totally dug it. It got better and better. I loved how this film is totally and utterly a bloodbath. Especially the last half, the last like second or third act of the film. It's so gruesome. And the opening sequence for this film, I think, is one of the best sequences I've seen in a long time. It feels like this was directed by Sam Raimi, which I thought was really interesting. And the thing that I really loved about this movie that I thought was really different. I mean, the remake that came out a few years back, like that one is really awesome, and that was known to be a real like mega bloodbath. Like it's super gory and it's very horrific and it's very jarring and you get this really uneasy feeling watching that film, which is very true. This film has those aspects, but it's very very different. The thing that I the thing that I felt is pretty unique around this film is that it deals I don't know, to a degree, on a little bit more in a serious kind of framework, to a degree, because it deals with a family and it's centered on a mother and her kids and their sister, the mother's sister. So it's centered on this like family unit. It's really centered on this family dynamic. It takes place in a very unique kind of location. It takes place in this family's apartment in the city. Very very different kind of aesthetic. But I like that it really deals with kind of a family dynamic and to a degree, family trauma and a family falling apart. And I thought it was really unique. And I thought it was cool that it got away from the typical thing of where it's centered on maybe a group of teenagers or a group of young people that all get, possessed or picked off. I thought that was cool because it kind of the focus was more on a family dynamic. And the thing too about this film is I thought the acting was really really great. I thought there was enough more or less backstory on the characters, particularly around the family, that kept my interest and that pulled me in. But the thing about this film is I feel like this film has some of the creepiest moments that I've seen in a while in film. Well, I remember when I first saw Hereditary, there were some moments in that film where it generally creeped me all out, like just full on. And I feel like there's moments of this film that has that and doesn't rely on the typical kind of jump scare thing or the kind of the typical horror tropes that we see a lot in, like, say, modern horror films. Like, this could have been very, very generic in a lot of ways, but I felt like they did a really great job with, trying to, push away from that. And I thought it was pretty effective, but again, it's really centered on this family dynamic. And the cast, Alyssa, Alyssa Sutherland, who is the mother, she plays Ellie. Lily Sullivan as Beth, the sister. Morgan Davies is one of the children, the son. Mia Chalice is Jessica. And Neil Fisher, they all play the kids. Gabrielle Echoes, Billy Reynolds McCarthy. The standout performance, and I think she carries the film. She's like the main character is the mother, and that's played by Alyssa Sutherland. Tremendous acting performance by this woman. Because again, it doesn't, as a horror film, it doesn't really rely on your typical thing that you see in horror films, like new horror films. It doesn't have those jump scares, but it's pretty character driven. But she is the main part, the main focus of this woman, and she's terrifying. I mean, and the acting, her acting in the film is just is incredible. And I like that they did something a little bit different. And again, if you're a fan of gore and zombies, there is there are scenes in this that are it's astounding how much blood there is, especially the last half of the film. And the thing that's cool with this film is that it also there's there's certain little moments in the film where they definitely pay tribute to the first two movies in the franchise. There's definitely like a tipping of the hat to those films, but yet they're moving it into different territory. And I thought it was interesting. I thought it was really one of the cool things that I liked about it was how the movie starts and then how the movie ends. It's there's like a kind of a cool bookends, and you really, at least for me, by the time it was kind of coming to a conclusion, I was really curious as to where it's going to go and how does it tie into the first part of the movie, the opening sequence, which is the opening sequence again is pretty amazing, and I thought it was really cool how they tied that together. And this movie is definitely a movie to see in the theater, like visually and the sound design. The sound design is just incredible. The score, the film score is just amazing. This film was directed by Lee Cronin, who I had never heard of before, and it was released by Warner Brothers, and it was produced by both Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell. I feel like they really had. It feels like they both Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell had their lots of input in this film. It really feels like I said a few minutes ago. There's moments of this film where I felt it really was maybe directed by Sam Raimi. It just has like his look, or the way Sam Raimi has a certain style, and like the way he would compose a shot and frame a scene, and then certain things that he would do with his actors. In that regard, it reminded me of Sam Raimi a lot because he's made so many great films, and he's one of those directors that, at least for me, when if I see a Sam Raimi film, I can tell it's him because of his creative force and the way he has a certain look of how he films things on the screen. But again, I think this was a really great visual experience and auditory experience, something that you need to experience in the theater. So really, really great, really impressive. I'd see it again. I have seen a few people criticize it. I've seen a few negative things recently, and I like to read reviews. And I try to go into movies as cold as I possibly can, and try to like make up my own mind. So I generally go in as cold as possible. I didn't read one review of this film. I heard buzz here and there that this film was very good, but that was it. I didn't read any reviews, and I didn't watch. I saw that a couple of guys that I follow online had posted a review because it opened on Thursday, and I stayed away from it. I was like, no, I'm gonna go into it totally cold. I just want to experience it. And then when I came home after the movie, I was like, well, I'll wait. I'll wait till today to watch the reviews and to check out all that crap. But then I was like kind of eager to check it out, and I read and I watched a couple of guys that I follow on YouTube quite a bit who do a lot of work where they cover new films. So I couldn't resist. So then I watched the reviews when I got home last night. And for the most part, they were really positive. The one criticism or criticisms of it were that they felt that they couldn't, there could have been more backstory on the family. There could have been, it's particularly around the kids, there could have been a little bit more of a thing of where their characters were fleshed out a little bit more. And they could have had a little bit more of a spark to where they were drawn in. I can understand that, but I felt it, for me at least, it gave just enough. It didn't have this whole elaborate thing. Like it felt like when the movie started, in my opinion, you were initially like a fly on the wall, and these people were just kind of doing their. This family was just kind of doing their everyday thing as a family, and you get a sense of some things that are happening in the family, particularly around the husband or the boyfriend. I believe it's the husband who seems like he's kind of like the marriage is having some the marriage itself is in crisis, and a husband apparently has kind of left the nest for a while, and that they're having some problems, and it's slowly affecting the family. But I felt like it brings you into that, like that's your introduction, but there's just enough. It doesn't go elaborately into who these people are, the family, who the kids are. I felt like their on-screen presence in the moment was, for me, just enough, and it was, because you go to an Evil Dead movie because you want that satisfying horror experience. You want to see demons. You want to see people get become possessed. You want to see copious amounts of blood, and you want to be entertained. Like that's really it. And I thought that they did a good job with like doing something a little bit different, having it focused on this family dynamic, but at the same time just giving you enough information. And I felt the characters were likable enough that they had a resonance. So I can understand that. That's a legitimate thing, but I felt as a viewer it was just enough. So, but very, very good movie. And I definitely recommend, and I definitely recommend that because of the production value. There's a really great balance of practical effects in this film, which I'm a huge fan of. There's a tremendous amount of that, and very, very cool. And so there's a good balance. There's definitely probably some CGI in this film, but it's hard to tell. But from what I gathered from watching the film, is that most of the stuff is in camera. Obviously, it has a very large budget, but it has an old school kind of 80s vibe to it, because it does feel like a lot of those effects and the gore that's being shown and the violence, for the most part, are in camera. So it's very, very cool. And so I highly recommend this film. I'd see it again. I love everything really at the end of the day that's tied to the Evil Dead franchise. I have my favorites. I have my things that I like more. And I think this is a really great addition to this awesome franchise. I think I'd be excited to see more of these films, especially when they're, trying to change things up a little bit as far as where the stories might take place, the different kind of dynamics that they might throw in with different characters. So, yeah, really great. And I think so far this year, 2023, has been really great with new releases. It's been pretty killer. And so, yeah, I definitely recommend this film. It's really great. I think it's had a lot of hype around it, but I overall think it's, for the most part, for me at least, has lived up to that hype. So this is Jason Dean here at Film Fanatic. So if you get a chance, please check out Evil Dead. And if you like this page, please subscribe and keep the comments coming. I love having those interactions with people. So we will see you next time. Peace.